if that's all it's doing, it's not enough. It's not enough to be a scene. You've got to find a way to inject another level or layer to it.
Do great writers plan out their stories, or do they discover them as they write?
I think there's two kinds of writers. I think some writers tend to plan more than others, and some writers are, and I'm more of that. I'm more of like I kind of have to get into the story and sort of discover it. You know, and I think the concept, on the conceptual level, when I'm trying to figure out, okay, what is this story about? I'll do some planning, but when you get into the nuts and bolts of like, this happens, and then this happens, and you have a progression of scenes, I kind of have to get into it and write it a little bit to really feel like, okay, is this working? What's happening? And then sometimes you get surprised because people, a character is making choices throughout the script, and they might make a choice that you get to the end of the scene, it's like, oh, they have to go this way in the story. And I wasn't really expecting that. And so I got to go off on this direction and see what that does. And I find that for me, for my writing, it feels more like I can discover more unique paths if I kind of jump in and sort of discover it as I go.
Is there any kind of structure to your brainstorming process?
Not really. I keep a notebook. I think the main structure I have is I have this notebook, and I used to try to keep different journals for different projects, but it would get so confused. So I've just figured out, I just write everything in a notebook, and I write a date, so I know exactly when the idea came, and I know exactly when, like, how it develops throughout. It's kind of a cool process because, like, I can look back and say, oh, this is kind of the first seed of Cipher happened, here, and that kind of stuff. And I'll write different ideas, like, on Monday I'll have an idea for this, and then on Tuesday I'll be thinking about another idea, and I just write it on a different page, and it kind of helps me keep track of everything. And so as I'm developing an idea, I always like to write things out on paper. It just helps me kind of live in it a little bit more, because once I go to the computer and start writing out the script, it's a much different experience and process. So I kind of like to live on the page and write. And that's always kind of helped me kind of, if there's any organization to my developing ideas, that's probably it.
It's interesting too, because Nora always had this notepad with her to write down different notes. Maybe not ideas for stories, but ideas, she's a journalist, and different key things that she either wanted to follow up on or note.
Yeah. Yeah, well, I think, she's a writer, so I think that's kind of, we're similar in that way. So I guess there is a little bit of me in that sense in the film.
And she has like this natural curiosity, for better or worse.
Yeah.
And you can see that it really fuels her, what she does and her life. And even though she's contained to this one spot, she just has this curiosity. So yeah, I love the film. I love how the different backstory, the different parts of Nora are revealed slowly throughout the film. You don't know exactly what's happening in terms of why she's in this situation, and it's beautifully done.
Thank you. Yeah, I think I also just like films like that where you kind of don't always know everything right up front. Sometimes I'll watch a film and a film that reveals the killer early in the film, and then it's kind of about sort of will the killer, outwit the detective. Sometimes those movies are really good, and then sometimes I'm kind of like, man, I kind of like the mystery of not knowing until the very end. Something about that is fascinating to me. And so I think I'm really drawn to films that kind of have a mystery, like the character doesn't even know themselves, and so there's a mystery that they're discovering some of the stuff in their own heart. I think that stuff can be fascinating to watch.
When should a writer start putting ideas into a structure?
I think as late as possible, because if you try to put too much structure on the story too early, you get locked into plot. And every story that can be told has already been told, right? And so a lot of times plot can be, if you get too locked into a specific plot, then you lose the opportunity to explore your character. And I think the most interesting thing about a movie is the characters that are in it and the character arcs that they go on. And even the most plot-driven movie will have interesting characters that you're watching, go on that plot, go through that plot. So I think it's actually important to delay as much as you can, really putting as much structure, whatever that looks like for you. I know everyone's process is different, but, being open, I think being as open to, surprising yourself in the story is also important, because then the audience will be surprised. I think Stephen King has talked about like not even knowing the ending to some of his stories. One of my favorite series of his is the Dark Tower series, and he wrote it over like 30 years. And this lady wrote him, and she was like, "I'm dying of cancer. Will you please tell me the ending? Because I don't think I'm going to live until to read the last book." And he felt so bad. He's like, "I'm so sorry. I don't know the ending."
Oh, wow.
He's like, "And if I did, I would tell you." So even in that moment, like he doesn't know the ending to the story. And, someone is, I think Stephen King is an incredible writer. And I think a lot of what he does is he kind of lives in that surprise. He talks about writing as excavating. He's excavating the bones of the plot. And there is discovery in that. And so I think if you can discover surprising things about the story along the way, then you can also surprise the audience.
Did you read On Writing?
Yes, On Writing is an incredible book. It's great because it has a lot of technical advice, but then just the philosophy, the fact that he's just so honest about even his drug addiction. Like, so much of his personal life bleeds into his writing. And even in seeing him talk about that in that book, you see like my personal life is going to bleed into my filmmaking. That's just a fact. And finding a way to maybe allow that to happen in maybe the natural way, but also like in creative ways, I think can help. Because sometimes just like putting stuff I'm into, like taking my life and just putting it on film isn't necessarily going to equal a great project or a great story, but maybe finding ways to adapt some of my experiences for other characters, I think can make the film feel alive to the audience.
And he lived such an interesting life too.
He
and
did.
Then even working as a teacher and then in laundromats and just, doing different things. And yeah, it was I enjoyed it.
Yeah.
When you're writing, how do you come up with ideas for scenes?
That is a very interesting question, because I think scenes are the bones or even the meat of a film. You're living inside of scenes, but for me, I guess the way I decide to write a scene is what did the scene before, where is that leading? And so if a character makes a choice in this scene, then I've got to see it play out in this scene. And if you just have a movie where you just go from scene to scene to scene, and there's no, if you're setting up in here and you're not paying off in a later scene, then your film's not going to feel connected, and you see that sometimes in films where it's like, okay, this is an action movie, so they have to go to the mountain fortress and it's got to blow up, but that isn't necessarily the most interesting thing that could happen, because we've seen that, right? And so what actually would make the climax of the film more interesting? You saw something like I think it was in Captain America Civil War, like instead of fighting in this big battle in a city where everything's blowing up, they have a really contained fight in a little room, and that, I thought that was really interesting, because I was not expecting that for a Marvel movie. They went small at the end.
What's your approach for writing a scene?
I think a good scene I think every scene has to do at least two things. And whatever those two things are, it doesn't matter. I think it just needs to serve more than one purpose, basically. And so I also think a scene needs to have conflict. I think that's really important. You need to have two opposing perspectives. So I think, you have a scene is, let's just say two characters walk into a room, they both have different perspectives, and they're gonna have an argument about it. And that argument might be, verbal. Maybe it's a fight. You have action scenes where like it's two opposing perspectives coming into and clashing, right? So I think as long as you have that conflict and the story, the scene is moving the story forward for more than one purpose. I think that's how a scene can be more than just a link in the chain. I think a lot of times people are sometimes you see a scene, it's like, oh, that scene's only there to get us from this scene to the scene after. And that's only doing one thing. You need the scene to do more than one thing. It needs to be, okay, it's getting us this next thing, but then, oh, right here, suddenly the characters have a little, disagreement that then 4 scenes later is now developed into the main disagreement in the film. Something like that, I think, helps make a scene purposeful.
Yeah, and with Death Cipher, Nora was alone so much of the time that she needed an outside sort of catalyst to bring something new in terms of conflict.
Yeah, and that was, I think, the challenge with Death Cipher is like there's not really 2 people in every room talking. It was really 80% of the film is her by herself, and then she has several conversations on the phone or over video chat, but it still feels different, to me. And so I think in some ways that was like some of the video chats that are in the film, that was me trying to inject some of that conflict of perspective, because she and Colt have 2 different perspectives about how to approach this central issue. And then at the same time, the main, I'll say the main antagonist in the film, even though that's a little broad for the film, the main antagonist has another perspective, totally different from Nora's. And so I think trying to make sure there are different perspectives in conflict with each other is how you show a good character arc, but also how the scenes stay alive and continue to be interesting.
When are you satisfied with a scene that you've written?
I am never satisfied when a scene is written. I think as a writer, you write something and you close your laptop for the day and you're like, man, that was a great scene. You wake up the next morning, you read that scene, you're like, that is not a good scene. You feel, you're constantly like, okay, is it good enough? I think that's a constant battle. And so what's really, I think, helpful also being a director is I know, even if on the page I have maybe a little bit of it's 99% there, but there's still that 1%. I know that on set, as the director, I can probably fix that. Or in rehearsals, I can work with the actors to maybe find that missing little thing, whatever it is. And so I think being a writer-director comes with the advantage of, even though I'm never satisfied, and even as a writer, if there's a director he's directing your script, he's gonna bring changes. He's gonna bring something different to it. Either they might have to adjust the wardrobe or change the setting or whatever. And so that's just gonna happen. And so I think it's nice when you're on both sides of that, where you can say, and you can be open to say, okay, I know as the writer, this isn't quite there, but then as director, I'll find a way to make it better.
How do you fix a bad scene?
I think you have to ask some hard questions about the scene. Is it serving a purpose? I think bad scenes a lot of times are a piece that you're trying to connect 2 other pieces. And if that's all it's doing, it's not enough. It's not enough to be a scene. You've got to find a way to inject another level or layer to it. And so I think trying to find just some small way to add something to it. And I don't always know what that something is. Sometimes the actors just bring that on the day. Sometimes it's just having one little, making film is about solving problems. And so when you get there on the day and you're like, wow, this scene isn't quite working, you have to stop and say, okay, well, what would fix it, or what needs to happen? What is it missing? And collaborating with other people, asking other people to help you. I think the beauty of filmmaking is you're not just sitting in a room by yourself, trying to solve the problem. You have other people, actors, crew, producers that you can work with. Even at the level I was at, I still had at least 2 or 3 people with me that I could be like, okay, I'd talk to Ashley, I'd be like, okay, it feels like that didn't quite work, right? And she'd be like, yeah, it didn't feel right. And then we'd talk about it, we'd have a conversation and find another way. And then if there was another crew on set, they might even chime in and say something, and so there is the collaborative aspect can help you sometimes with that. And as the writer, if you're just writing it, I think getting a lot of people to read it and give you feedback, and being open to feedback. I think that's really hard as a writer. Sometimes someone says, hey, this scene doesn't feel like it's working. And you as a writer can be like, you're the meanest person who's ever lived. Why would you tell me that my script is not perfect, you know? But, you know, you can be very sensitive as a writer, right? And so you just have to learn to be like, okay, even if I don't think they're right about the note, maybe there's something behind it, you know, maybe even something earlier in the script that's making this scene not work, you know? And if you can, you know, try to do maybe a little bit of excavating, try to do a little bit of investigation to see why, you know, especially in the script stage, when you can solve those problems at the script stage, like do it then. Be honest with yourself, be willing to take a little feedback, be willing to accept that maybe your writing is not the perfect writing that you feel like it is sometimes, that maybe something needs to be adjusted.
Did anybody criticize your writing when you showed them first, second, third draft?
Yeah, I was able to get several people. I had some friends and some peers in the film industry that read it and gave me feedback, and that was invaluable. I mean, there was a constant, you know, conversation about Nora as a character. Like, is she likable? You know, because she sort of goes on this journey and she's by herself, right? So there are, you know, there's not a lot of people around her to, you know, you can't give her a kid to make her likable because I can't put another person in this film, you know? I can't, because of the way the story was told, you know, we were sort of locked into like, this is kind of who she is. And this is the character I want to show. So how can we make small adjustments to make her more likable, to create moments where we can at least empathize with her or sympathize with her because, you know, maybe I don't always agree with every choice she's making, but something about her journey makes me want to keep rooting for her, you know? And so that was something that was so incredibly helpful when people read it and be like, hey, Nora did this and I didn't really like it. I don't think I like her. And so I'm like, okay, well, why is that? And it wasn't always that choice that she was making in that moment. It was something maybe that happened in the first act. And I had to go back and be like, okay, what can I do here to fix the later problems?
Was that important though, that did you not want to write like this anti-hero? It was important that she was someone that you wanted to protect?
You know, I think something, as I started getting into pre-production, I did have to start thinking about, well, what, at this budget level, you know, people don't always give you the benefit of the doubt. If Chris Pine's in your movie and you have $40 million, people are going to be like, okay, maybe if he's a little bit, if he makes some choices at the beginning of the film, he's got so much charisma, he'll just win me over, right? And I know who Chris Pine is. Well, there's no names in my film, right? You know, we're meeting this character for the first time. We're meeting this actress for the first time. So we've got to do a little bit of work on the front end to try to make it so that we can root for her. Whereas when you have, I saw a movie recently where like the actor was a famous actor. He was a very unlikable character, but because I knew who he was, I was just like, oh, I'm still kind of here for it, you know? And that's an advantage to having a name in your film that I think can help sometimes with those issues. But when you're writing it, you don't always know who's going to be the actor, right? So you have to, especially in the writing stage, do everything you can, I think, to get the audience on the side of your main character. And you even see that with anti-heroes sometimes. They do little things where maybe doesn't make them likable, but it makes you understand them. And so because you understand them, you can say, okay, I understand why they're making these choices, even if I don't agree with them. So I'll go on this journey to see where it leads.
And things are revealed as the movie goes on,
right.
Where you see some of her backstory and
yeah,
you can empathize with her. So.
And I think I've heard from several people. You know, I think some people, and I think with any film, some people, you know, will watch it and be like, well, you know, I didn't agree, you know, or I didn't necessarily like the choice that she made. And then other people are like, I love that film. I love her, you know, and I think there's also something subjective about it. That some people are going to watch it and walk away with one interpretation or one feeling, and some people are going to walk away with a different one. And I think that's okay. I think great films have, you know, like an ability to maybe hit people in different ways. And the films that I like are, you know, I sometimes will, like, I like a film and I'll go talk to somebody, I love this film, and they'll be like, I hated that film, you know? And I'm like, okay. I mean, that's what filmmaking is about. Storytelling is, you know, you tell these stories and there is an audience out there who loves it. And then sometimes there's people who don't, and that's okay. I think that's part of it.
Thank you for watching the video all the way to the end. Here is a complimentary question from our book story questions.